Izuku Midoriya already wields one for all. During a solo training retreat in the Ninja Mountains, he discovers a sealed cavern and a forbidden scroll that teaches Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clones that are real enough to fight, and, because they're made from his energy, each clone can channel one for all and his unlocked sub-quirks. In this video we are going to see what if Deku learns shadow clones from the forbidden scroll. For more videos make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and do sub. You can support me on my Patreon, link in description.
Chapter 1. The Mountain That Remembers. The trail was older than the map. Pines leaned like watchmen in green armor, and the air at the ridge tasted of iron and snow. Izuku Midoriya, Deku, stopped to breathe, hands on knees, then bounced twice on his toes the way he always did before pushing farther. In the valley below, train tracks whistled. At this height, the world sounded like a seashell. All Might trained here, once, the old caretaker had said when Deku asked about a secluded place to work on one for all without leveling a forest. But there are places up there that remember other kinds of power. He hadn't planned to find one. A coy wind found a crack behind a slate boulder. Deku's danger sense tickled, not alarm, more like a tap on the shoulder. He pressed, the boulder slid, and a cold exhale rolled from a dark throat of stone. A tunnel. The floor dipped into a chamber where the rock had been smoothed, not by water, by hands. The walls were cut with triangles and arcs that reminded him of support course drafting diagrams, except they wrapped around each other like braided rope. At the center, a lacquered box bound in red cord, a seal tag, old paper, fresh menace, shivered like it was breathing. Seals? Deku whispered, voice swallowed by the dome. He had read about them in foreign hero journals. Chakra constructs. Superstition to most modern agencies. His notebook hand twitched. He reached out, then hesitated. Danger sense buzzed, not a scream, a question. He bowed, because that felt right, then set his fingers to the cord. One for all stirred, a tide in his bones. Threads of black whip peeked from his forearms, thin and careful. He eased the cord loose and lifted the lid. The scroll inside was short, not like a book, more like a single idea rolled up tight. Its ink was crisp, its diagrams strikingly clear. A man splitting into many, each silhouette with the same fierce spiral stamped at the belly. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He read aloud, tasting the syllables. Shadow clone technique. The margin notes were clipped and practical. Shortcuts are expensive. If you can't pay in focus, you'll pay in body. The clone is you, with a smaller wallet. The receipts always come back when it pops. Deku smiled before he could stop himself. Receipts? He could work with receipts. He stepped back, rolled his shoulders, and let one for all wake in his tendons. 45%. No, play it safe. 30. He set the scroll in front of him and, following the neat, ancient steps, pressed his palms together. Focus the breath, shape the current, divide the intent, not the doubt, he murmured. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The room clapped back with a puff of cool air and a second Deku stumbled out of smoke, blinking. Wow, Clone Deku said, then looked down at his hands. Where me? Are you okay? Deku asked reflexively, then realized talking to himself could become a habit. Clone Deku's grin tilted. Only one way to find out. Black whip laced out from the clone's forearm. Thinner, yes, but steady. He hopped, and for a heartbeat float caught him before gravity reclaimed the floor. Smokescreen billowed when he snapped a hand. He cut it off with a gasp. Sorry. Ventilation in here is... Wow. They laughed, and the cavern threw the sound back to them, doubled again. Deku made a second seal. Kage Bunshin no. Puff. A third Deku appeared, landing in a crouch. He flexed his legs and Fa Jin stored energy like springs being wound. When he released it, a flash of speed carried him to the far wall and back. Harmless as a breeze at 30%. His eyes widened. We can train 3 tracks at once. We can fight 3 tracks at once, said the first clone, more serious now. But the receipts. Come back to me when you dispel, the original finished. So if you learn a pattern, I learn a pattern. If you misjudge a kick, I feel the bruise when you pop. He let that sit. Shortcuts are expensive, but done right, they're investments. They spent hours testing. Danger sense radiated like a dull star, and each clone could feel the same tingle. When Deku wove Black Whip and Float together, the clones learned faster, adjusting angles he hadn't considered and then dispelling to dump clear, annotated memories into his mind. The feedback loops stacked like gears. By sunset, he stood at the mouth of the cave with 3 clones arranged on the slope behind him, each at a different elevation. The mountain breathed in blues and gold, shadows long and wise. "We should seal it back," Clone 2 said quietly. Deku nodded. "We're not thieves. We're students." They returned the scroll to its box and wound the red cord with care. The seal tag resettled, but when Deku pressed the boulder back into place, he felt something different in the stone. Not anger, agreement. On the descent, his phone buzzed. "Pro Hero Dispatch. Urgent. Landslide near Rope Bridge Trail. Civilians trapped. Evac team ETA 25 minutes. Nearby heroes 0. Deku looked up the mountain, then down the deep cut of the ravine toward the rope bridge. Danger sense prickled, and his clones snapped their heads the same way. "Investments," Deku said. "Let's work." He sprinted, a clone to each side. The bridge came into view. Fraying, bowed by weight. A family clung to the far side's anchor post while Ak dust curled off a fresh scar in the cliff. Pebbles tinked like beads on drumskin. "Plan," said Clone 1, already slinging Black Whip to the left support. "Airway," said Clone 2, filling his lungs. "Smokescreen as a windbreak if the slope cuts loose. Short bursts, keep visibility." "Footing grid," said Clone 3, crouching. Fa Jin wound in his calves. "Leap points for the original to carry them in sequence." "Go," Deku said. They moved like a cord. Black Whip lines bit into rock and post, webbing the bridge, adding lateral support. Smokescreen puffed low along the slide channel, BBing dust so Deku's danger sense could parse the real threats. Deku floated off the slope, touching air more than rope, then dropped onto the first anchor with just enough weight to talk, not enough to jolt. "Hi, heroes inbound, but we're faster, one at a time, okay? I've got you." He smiled at the little boy first. "Wanna ride the safest zipline in the world?" The kid's nod was a tremble. Deku scooped him under the arms. Black Whip kissing the bridge to steady, and stepped onto nothing. Float held him like a promise while Clone 3 became a stepping stone of bursts, landing exactly where Deku's toes would touch if Float faltered. It didn't, but the plan meant it could have, and everyone lived either way. By the time the evac team appeared on the far ridge, sirens like insects in the trees, the family was across and resting. Deku dismissed a clone to drink the memories and grinned when a perfect ledger of micro-adjustments slid into his mind like notes in a margin. He had learned Re from that rescue than a week of solo drills. He looked back up the trail where the mountain hid its old room. "Thank you," he whispered, and the pines creaked like they were nodding. Next chapter. What I'm planning, Deku stress tests shadow clones in urban rescue drills at UA, and all might, Bakugo react. A low-level villain crew uses stolen tech to create mirror illusions that confuse Fur Saint responders. Deku's clone doctrine turns the confusion against them. If you want, suggest which classmates, e.g., Uraraka, Iida, Todoroki, Tsuyu, should co-opt the first clone relay tactic. Chapter 2. 3 problems solve each other. Word traveled fast at UA. You didn't show up with a new martial science, without the rumor mill waking up hungry. "Izuku," Iida said, adjusting his glasses so hard they squeaked. "Is it true you can now bifurcate? Multiply," Kaminari said, already wiggling his eyebrows. "Like, we can be in 2 bands at once, multiply?" "Focus," Momo chided. "Operationally speaking, duplication expands search coverage, triage nodes, and load-bearing options, if clones have equivalent strength." "Equivalent enough," Deku said. He brought his hands together. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, puff puff puff." 3 Dekus. A few classmates startled, then leaned forward like they were at a magic show where the magician announced up front it wasn't magic. Aizawa's hair drifted in the AC. "If you break my gym, you repair my gym," he said from his sleeping bag cocoon near the wall. "Yes, sir," all 4 Dekus said. They set up a disaster simulation in Gym Gamma, foam, concrete, suspended I-beams, and pressure pad, civilians, whose vitals would plummet if jostled wrong. Deku assigned each clone a role: Anchor, Black Whip support, Scout, Danger sense mapping, and B. Erst, Fa Jin movement and debris clearance. The original ran triage and float-based transport. "Add me," Uraraka said, stepping forward with that particular courage she wore like a backpack, visible, practical. "I can lighten the load paths." And me, Tsuyu said. Scouts need long eyes. Bakugo? Deku asked. Bakugo snorted, arms crossed. I'm not hauling your copies. I'm stress testing them. Perfect, Deku said, and meant it. The simulation clock chattered to life. At 0, Scout Clone closed his eyes, letting Danger Sense etch a constellation of "don't" in his mind, then relayed over comms. 2 unstable stacks main hall, 1 sparking cable in stairwell, 3 heat signatures behind warp door, could be workers. Copy. The original built a black whip frame around the door. Eel Anchor Clone lashed eye beams to winches. Uraraka, lighten the door. Burst, you're on swing and catch if it drops weird. Ribbit, Tsuyu said. I'll mark a safe jump line with tape. It turned into choreography. Deku carried a civilian across mid-air stepping points while Burst Clone leapt ahead, landing with Fa Jin gentle enough to plant a cup of water. Bakugo, true to his word, attacked the plan with explosions, not at people. At assumptions. He rocked load paths with concussive pops. Anchor Clone compensated with new black whip bracing, and Uraraka feathered gravity to bleed off sudden stresses. Aizawa didn't blink, but his sleeping bag rustled like a nod. When the last civilian pinged stable, Deku dispelled Scout and caught the flood of impressions. The exact pitch of a beam that would have slipped. The hairline crack in a foam pillar that wasn't load-bearing but was scary. The way Danger Sense grew quieter when a threat had a plan baked into it. You're quieter, Bakugo said, wiping carbon dust onto his shorts. In your head, less screaming, more aiming. I have distributed cognitive noise, Deku said, fumbling for words. The clones handle some of the what-ifs, then return only the highlights. Don't get smug, Bakugo growled, but there was pride under it, old and grudging. Because villains won't politely arrange themselves in your 3-node dream. As if the city heard him. The alarm on Aizawa's phone chirped. He checked it, then unzipped from the bag in one sinuous motion. Fieldwork, he said. Downtown, a crew is using a reflection emit, black market tech, to flood an intersection with fake pedestrians and fake vehicles. First responders are stuck, heroes are mis-stepping. We're going. They were already sprinting. Downtown looked like a bottle of sunlight had shattered. Ghost cars merged into ghost people while real civilians hugged storefronts. Every reflection cast its own reflection, fractal and cruel. Pro-heroes were on Parameter duty, keeping people back because charging through meant risking a real body in the unreality. This way, a policeman shouted. We can't tell. He flinched as a phantom bus drove through him. What's touchable? Got it, Deku said. He summoned 2 clones without breaking stride. We treat the illusions as threats until proven not. Scout goes broad. Map every object with Danger Sense. Anchor walks slow, uses black whip taps. Real pushes back. Where's the emitter? Todoroki asked. Somewhere it can see everything, Momo said, scanning rooftops. Like a traffic cam. High, central. On it, Iida said. Engines whining. They split. Scout Clone let Danger Sense paint an aurora of nope and maybe. He discovered a rule. Illusions didn't make Danger Sense sing unless a real vehicle hid inside them. Useful. He cut the district into zones of probable reality and fed Deku a live overlay. Anchor Clone touched Black Whip to a ghost sedan. It passed through, so he marked it safe with a holopuck from Momo's belt. The real sedan behind it got a "Do Not Enter" banner instead. Deku took the original right through the kaleidoscope with Float, hopping between the confirmed, real islands. Plucking stranded civilians like apples from a glass tree. Uraraka lightened a toppled traffic light so Tsuyu could lever a biker free. Bakugo rocketed past a glimmer crowd, blasting holes in false people that closed like ripples. On a rooftop, Iida found the emitter, a gleaming lens on a pan-tilt rig, and 2 villains guarding it. Hands up, one shouted, firing a stuttering flash from a wrist device. For a second, Iida saw 3 of himself and stumbled. Redundant targets, the villain smirked. Redundant solutions, said Burst Clone, arriving in a whip crack of stored steps. He feinted left, dispelled in a pop of smoke that made the guard flinch. Then the real Deku rose on Float from the right and tapped the pan-tilt rig with Black Whip like a fencer touching a bell. Momo's MP charge, already built on the sprint over, thunked and burped. The lens went dark, downtown exhaled, the world went back to one of each thing. The crowd roared, relief a wave that washed the grit out of people's eyes. Deku landed with a soft roll, heart hammering, not from effort, from the feeling of an idea clicking into the world rather than just around his head. They had a contingency, Bakugo grunted, hauling one villain's hands behind his back with zip ties that smelled like a hospital. We had one bigger. Iida, dizzy but grinning, pointed at Deku's shadow clones. They are you, but they aren't redundant. They're specialists. Deku nodded. That's the doctrine. As the police loaded the emitter into a van, Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose like he was suppressing a headache, or a smile. Don't get cute with paperwork, he said. If you use that many yous in a report, write like one person. I'll consolidate, Deku said, and got a look that might one day be a joke. Next chapter. What I'm planning, a villain with a suppression quirk, silence, ambushes Deku. The quirk dampens any power inside zones of still air. Clones become liabilities if they're silenced mid-action. Deku has to invent shadow steps, a moving grid of clones that never let the air go still, plus a FA Jin battery trick where clones store and deposit motion in the original. Want me to include Todoroki's ice wind to break silence zones, or prefer a pure Deku solution? Chapter 3. Silence in the air. Night folded around the canal district, the water holding a thin skin of city light. Patrol wasn't glamorous, but Deku liked the rhythm, the way danger sense became a heartbeat against the quiet. It spiked. No footfalls, no thrown knife, just a lack, air that should have hummed wit. HAC units and late scooters became absolutely, unnervingly still. He didn't think, he clapped his hands. Cage Bunshin, smoke, and two clones landed by habit into a sprint, and crumpled, like so. One had turned off their muscles by remote. Deku lunged to catch one, found his arms rubber, Black Whip sluggish like it was dragging itself through gel. Danger sense pulsed hard enough to make his teeth ache. A voice slouched out of the dark. I prefer quiet, it said, every syllable too round. And I prefer my bounties alive. You don't look like much split up. The villain wore a scarf that drifted like ink underwater. The air around him was visibly thicker, rippling slightly like heat haze, except cold. He stepped, and the haze walked with him, a portable lullaby. Quirk, silence, Deku guessed aloud, because naming problems made them less scary. You dampen kinetic expression in an area. Mute the air so nothing wants to move. The man chuckled. Hero exams taught you metaphors. Good, use one while I carry you out. Deku let a clone pop, swallowing the memory dump. The exact radius where knees went to pudding. The way float barely held if you entered the zone but didn't start in it. Data, receipts. Okay, Deku whispered to himself. Don't start in it. He snapped another seal. Puff. Two clones appeared. But outside the villain's aura, on the lip of a rooftop and on a boat wake. They immediately began to move, storing FA Jin in calves and shoulders like winding watches. Run the grid, Deku said over bone-conductive comms. The clones didn't answer. They were him, and the plan lived in all of them. Clone rooftop leapt, landing a stride closer but never coasted. Constant micro-steps, a dance of little shuffles so the air never got a chance to set. Clone boat hopped from ripple to ripple float light. When their paths crossed the edge of silence, their bodies resisted, as if stepping into cold syrup, but their stored FA Jin spat them forward just enough to make a new step and a new step after that. They were moving targets that wrote their own sidewalk under their feet. Deku matched them. He kept his ankles alive, heels kissing pavement then leaving, never a full footfall long enough to be claimed. He discovered something. Danger sense didn't mute. If anything, it clarified inside the damp zone, a lone instrument in a hushed orchestra. The villain flicked his scarf, expanding the quiet. Stop wriggling. Can't, Deku said, smiling, breath even now that the trick had landed in his bones. It's a medical condition. Restless hero syndrome. He didn't lunge. He swam. Every Black Whip extension was a quick jab. No long rails to be soaked by silence. The clones added a new layer. FA Jin battery. They stored motion, then leapt into him, dispelling mid. Steps so the last instant of movement became memory and sensation he could spend. He learned to cash those deposits like coupons. A burst to get an arm up. A burst to yank a civilian back by their backpack strap. A burst, this one big, to slip behind the villain's right shoulder. Hi, Deku said softly, and the man flinched, surprised anybody could get that close quietly inside his quiet. Deku tapped him with Black Whip anchors, not wraps, just biting points. then used a float tug to slide them both together 10 centimeters and out of the zone's heart. In that sliver of looser air, Deku's strength flickered back to 30%. And he used exactly that much to turn the villain's wrist and click a capture cuff that Momo had redesigned to lock on pressure, not movement. The scarf went limp, the silence wobbled, then dissipated like someone lifted a blanket. You moved wrong, the villain said miserably. I practiced against sprinters. Me too, Deku said, and suddenly he missed Bakugo. You so acutely it felt like a laugh trying to escape the wrong way. They watched the patrol car taillights fade. Over the canal, the city exhaled. Deku sat on the railing, legs swinging, clones perched near him like gulls on a jetty. New doctrine entry, he said, scribbling in his notebook. Shadow steps. Never give the zone a still surface to claim. FA Jin battery transfers through clone dispel, safe at low loads, monitor at high. Monitor how? Clone Rooftop asked. Deku flexed his fingers. By not pretending receipts don't exist. He dismissed both clones and nearly slumped. The memory A. Valanche wasn't messy. He'd learned to aim it. But the volume packed his skull like a library being slid into place all at once. He breathed in fours until the shelf feeling settled. Shortcuts are expensive, he repeated to the night. We pay on time. Next chapter. What I'm planning. The Forbidden Scroll's seal begins to notice the world again. A subtle mark appears on Deku's palm when he overclones. And a vestige inside One for All reacts. We'll do a quiet chapter with All Might and the vestiges discussing identity versus copies, and then ramp into a public crisis. A high-end style bioweapon raids a hospital. Deku debuts Clone Orchestra. 30 microclones acting as a moving traffic system for civilians and heroes. Want me to include Recovery Girl, All Might mentorship beats, or jump straight into the hospital siege? Chapter 4. Receipts and Promises. The mark arrived after a long day of being 3 places at once. It was small, a spiral on Deku's left palm that wasn't ink and wasn't scar. More like a watermark you see only at a tilt. It tingled when he formed the clone seal, then warmed when he pushed past 10 clones. I don't like that, Recovery Girl said, peering over her glasses. I also didn't like it when All Might started coughing blood on my tiles, and he kept telling me he didn't like it either, as though that was treatment. Deku laughed despite the chill in his stomach. It doesn't hurt, it notices. What notices? All Might asked, thin form, eyes tired in the nice way tired looks when it comes from being somewhere people needed you. The scroll, Deku said, or what the scroll's ink was pointing at. They moved to the vestige space because some conversations wanted to stand under a bigger sky. Deku closed his eyes and let the old, beautiful hush of One for All's inner chamber unfold. Silhouettes and thrones of memory, edges bright as if lit from the inside. Yoichi smiled first. He was always first, kindness outtracing fear. A new mark, new rules, new receipts, Deku said. He explained the clones, the grid, the battery trick, the silence fight. His words looked like diagrams as he spoke. Here, ideas made pictures. The spiral on high, S palm glowed faintly in the vestige light. When he mentioned 30 clones, he'd tested, of course he had. The spiral twitched, as if clenching. The second leaned forward, elbows on knees. You've built a logistics army out of one boy, he said, not entirely approving, not entirely scolding. Good, but remember, armies have supply lines. Nana tilted her head. Supply lines are hearts and guts and sleep. Deku nodded. I can feel it now. There's a load where the clone memories stop slotting in like books and start stacking in a hall. He winced. I never want to be the guy with a hall full of unshelved books. All Might chuckled softly. Neither do librarians. Hikage, danger sense, raised a hand. Your silence villain gave you something valuable. A proof that you can think faster by letting parts of you think simpler. Keep the clones' jobs small. Make the original do the heavy decisions. And keep the mark from tightening, and, smokescreen, added. I don't like that either. The chamber rumbled, not ominous, like a city a few blocks away dropped its voice. Deku cracked his eyes open back in the infirmary just as Aizawa slid the door aside with his boot and tossed a tablet onto the bed. Hospital raid, he said. High-end style, fast, armored, adaptive. Targeting the gene therapy wing. Biotech off the loading dock. All Might was already moving, his coat hanger thin frame gaining a storm. They want leverage, they want fear, Aizawa said. We'll give them a system instead. They arrived to the kind of noise that drops in snowdrifts. sirens and screaming and the heavy wunk of a brute punching steel. The hospital's west face had been peeled like fruit, girders showing. A Nomu-adjacent creature clung to the torn edge, its torso sprouting a split maw that made a keening radio-static sound. Deku set his feet. Danger sense layered warnings. Falling glass, panicking feet, an ambulance backing without looking. He put his hands together. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Puff, 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 until the air around him was full of himself. Not 30, 24. The mark on his palm heated, and he held there. Orchestra positions, he said, and the clones fanned out like a flock finding thermals. Orchestra wasn't about punching, it was traffic control made flesh. 4 clones became conductor nodes at the corners. 8 became string, long black whip lines for lanes. 4 more stood as brass, loud, visible, waving people to safety and making noise where the frightened brain can follow it. Percussion clones made beat marks on the ground with chalk and glow tape, turning the path to the triage tent into a song. Step step pause, step step pause. People fell into rhythm, and rhythm stopped panic from ejecting them into danger. The real Deku left those jobs in motion and took Fa Jin and float to the breach. The bioweapon turned its dish mouth toward him, and the static keened higher. Danger sense screamed at a frequency he'd never felt, like it wasn't a single attack. It was 30 micro-attacks inside the scream. Loose bolts trembling free, a cart rolling toward a child, a gurney tipping. Bakugo would call this a party, Deku muttered, and smiled. Because he wasn't alone even when he was. He made himself into the gap filler. A clone took the child, dispelled mid-carry to let the real Deku inherit the exact hand position and float glide. A clone. He slapped a bolt back into a tighter thread and dispelled, giving Deku the tactile memory of which way to twist all the rest. A clone hugged a frightened nurse and whispered, "Breathe with me," then dispelled, leaving Deku with the cadence to repeat for the next 10 people. When the Nomu head swiveled, Todoroki's ice punched its ankle, stopping a rush. Aizawa's hair lifted, erasure slashed the room, and the Nomu's arm blades hiccuped. "You have 10 seconds, he said, dropping his goggles. Deku used 9. He slipped under a swing, planted 2 black whip anchors in its shoulder blades, fed Fa Jin he'd been saving into a short, dense burst that twisted the anchors like bottle caps, then floated up and over as the creature buckled. It wasn't a kill, it didn't have to be. It was a reorientation. The Nomu fell into a prepared string lane, and 8 clones yanked in concert, redirecting its mass into a reinforced stairwell brass had cleared. Momo's adhesive foam flowers bloomed along the landing. The Nomu hit like a truck in a safety net and, stuck. Silence fell, the kind full of crying and radio chatter and the clink of glass shifting to a safer angle. The mark on Deku's palm cooled. Orchestra hummed a little longer. The beat marks still telling people where their feet belonged. All Might appeared beside Deku, and for a second the old shadow of his giant form lay over both of them. Ika Myth doing a cameo in a smaller story. "You turned a crowd into a team," he said softly. "We turned a crowd into a team," Deku corrected, nodding at his clones as they saluted and winked out one by one. Their receipts filing themselves where they belonged. He sat on the curb when it was done, elbows on knees. The spiral on his palm pulsed once, approving. He couldn't tell, maybe it was just blood. "You okay?" Uraraka asked, handing him a bottle. "Yeah," he said, and meant it, with the particular kind of tired that felt like a promise kept. The spiral woke him before dawn. It wasn't pain, it felt like a fingertip drawing a circle on his palm from the inside, once, twice, and then settling into a low hum. Izuku lay still in the dorm room half dark, listening to the campus breathe. Someone's alarm in the next wing chirped, then died. A truck hissed across the distant avenue. His hand continued tracing a circle that he wasn't making. "Okay," he whispered to it. "I hear you." He sat up, pressed the heel of that palm to his notebook cover, and felt the mark warm as if the paper recognized it. The spiral impression wasn't ink, wasn't scar. It looked like a watermark that ONL.Y truly appeared when he tilted it toward morning light. He closed his eyes and stepped inward. Vestige weather. One for All's inner world received him like a cathedral of wind. Throne shapes drifted in a hush that was not empty. The oldest of them, Yoichi, raised his head first, eyes bright with a welcome that could have been a porch light. "You felt it too," Yoichi said gently. Deku lifted his left hand. Here, the mark was impossible to miss. A faintly luminous spiral, more idea than flesh, circling his palm with a patient rhythm. I think the scroll is still in the world, Deku said, groping for the right verbs. And it's looking back through me. The second crossed his arms, posture all blade and habit. It's not the scroll, boy. Ink is a message, not the messenger. He tipped his chin at the spiral. That's a contract stamp. A contract with who? Deku asked. Not who. What? Said N. Fog's soft voice like a half smile. With intent itself. Nana's laugh was kind and flinty at once. He's saying the shinobi weren't superstitious poets. They were engineers who learned how to talk to the parts of the world most people ignore. The air thickened behind Deku, a pressure like a door opening without hinges. A faint, robed silhouette stood out on a ledge that hadn't existed a moment before, as if the vestige space had built a balcony for one extra guest. Not a full person. More like a memory put upright. An after-image of someone who had spent their life writing rules into threads and knots. I am not yours, the figure said without moving its mouth, the words like ink drying. I am a reflection of an agreement made, and of the hands that kept it. Deku bowed before he remembered to. Did I break your seal? You opened a practice, the figure said. Breaking is a word for thieves. Opening is a word for students. The spiral measures a single thing. How far the copies wander from the intention that made them. Yoichi's eyes warmed. Distance, not number. Exactly. The figure, call it the scribe, said. One person can be many if the song is the same. One person can be one and still be lost if the song goes crooked. The scribe's head tilted, and Deku fell. Seen in a way that made him want to stand straighter. The more your copies sing against each other or against you, the tighter the spiral pulls. Pull long enough against yourself and strings snap. Deku rotated his wrist. The spiral pulsed once, not scolding, confirming. So it isn't punishing me for using clones. Tools do not punish, the scribe said. They warn, and sometimes they consent. The second snorted. You hear that? Consent. From a stamp. From you. Nana corrected. Eyes on Deku. The stamp just keeps score. Hikage, quiet in his corner, lifted a finger. You noticed how danger sense changes when your clones disperse? The world is louder when your intentions scatter. That's your first limit. Before muscles, before lungs. Deku nodded slowly. Yesterday after the hospital I dispelled the last 4 at once. The memories slotted clean, but for a second everything in the room sounded like it wanted to be first. Don't stack receipts, Yoichi said softly. File as you go. All Might's outline coalesced at Deku's shoulder the way sunrise coalesces around things it chooses to love more. The symbol's thin form carried a gravity the big one never needed to prove. If the spiral tallies drift, he said, then our boy needs operating rules that keep the choir together. He turned, including everyone with a glance that was half question, half tease. Shall we help him write a first draft? Deku opened his notebook even though the pages here were metaphor, not paper. The act mattered. The scribe's balcony leaned closer as if to read. The clone doctrine, draft 0.9. They spoke it into being. Anchor intention. Every deployment starts with one sentence everyone can repeat. Get civilians across. Stabilize the load path. Blind the emitter. Clones that can't say the sentence out loud don't spawn. Small jobs. Fast filing. Each clone has a micro mission and a time box. When the job is done or the clock hits, dispel and file. Don't let clones start new jobs without handoff. No pain without purpose. Clones do not exist to suffer in your place. Last resort impacts and breakfalls require explicit choice in the moment. Nana tapped TH. Is twice with a finger that had thrown herself between a child and death more times than memory had room for. One voice to civilians. However many you are, one speaks for rescue. Panic latches onto conflicting authority. Hikage's rule. Danger sense hates echoes. Receipt discipline. Never dispel more than N at once unless you're seated, safe, and someone else is watching your eyes. All Might supplied the N. Your current number is 4. You earned that with yesterday's orchestra. It will change. Don't guess. Measure. No quiet fragmenting. If you feel the spiral tighten while doing offense, step back to rescue or coordination. Release pressure where your heart knows how to agree. The scribe's balcony rested its invisible elbows on an invisible rail. You will outgrow these words. But I recognize the shape. Deku looked down at his palm. The spiral glowed softly, as if the sigil approved not of answers but of questions that bound together. This isn't a license, the second said. Still prickly because men who survived revolutions rarely trusted comfort. It's guardrails. Guardrails keep buses on mountains, Nana said, and that was the end of that. Mentorship hour. The infirmary smelled like eucalyptus and old bandages. All Might walked with a careful flamboyance that said I am not in a hurry, therefore neither are you, and Deku's should. RS relaxed just watching him pour tea from Recovery Girl's dented kettle. People will ask, All Might said, handing him a cup that had once been white. Are clones, people? Deku stared into the steam. They're me. Then the answer is, I am a person. I refuse to treat myself like bulk material. He tapped the notebook. Your Rule 3, no pain without purpose, is where law meets ethics. Rem. Ember. Public trust doesn't live in courtrooms. It lives in living rooms where parents decide whether to let their kids cheer for you. Deku nodded. I don't want to become a factory. You won't, All Might said simply. Factories produce sameness. You produce care. He set his own cup down, gaze drifting momentarily to the window where clouds limped by like old dogs. I never had a literal choice to multiply. But I had a cultural one. I could have tried to be everywhere at once by stretching until I snapped. Or, and he smiled, a worn gold coin of a thing, I could be somewhere fully and let others be elsewhere fully too. I keep thinking about Bakugo, Deku blurted. How he tests the plan by attacking it. It keeps me honest. Good, All Might said. Honesty is a muscle. Train it. His eyes, suddenly sharp, returned to the spiral on Deku's palm. Now I'm going to ask the hard question. Do you like the feeling of being many? Deku breathed. He didn't answer right away, which was an answer. I like the silence after I filed the last receipt, he said finally. I like the rightness when the plan clicks in a room full of people and all their footsteps become the same song. He laughed at himself, embarrassed. I like problem solving with myself. It feels like a family meeting that ends with pizza instead of slammed doors. All Might's smile went sideways. Then guard the part of you that likes it. Anything we like can turn compulsive in a crisis. Next time the world screams, remember the quiet you like is made of agreements, not volume. I'll write it down, Deku promised. Writing is the act of promising to your future self, All Might said, and his voice hid 1,000 unkept promises to his. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Recovery Girl pretended not to listen from 3 beds away, but she smiled into her crossword. Policy, or how to count a choir. Principal Nezu's office contained exactly the kind of tea service that made people forget they were in a meeting with a genius rodent. Aizawa looked like an ink spill in the sunlit chairs. Momo had a tablet and 3 laws bookmarked already. Thank you for coming, Midoriya, Nezu said, paws steepled. Eyes alight with the sort of glee that meant ethics would be discussed and snacks might appear. Deku felt the spiral warm in his palm not as a warning but as a reminder that agreements in the heart needed siblings in the rulebook. Let's start practical, Aizawa said. Liability. If a clone causes property damage, who pays? Me, Deku said immediately. Good, Aizawa grunted. Second, consent. People deserve to know whether the voice giving them directions is a clone or the original. Momo nodded. Transparency builds trust, but we must balance it with operational security. She glanced at Deku. Can your clones display a visible marker? Armband? Light? Something civilians can recognize without needing a seminar. I can, Deku said. I can also assign a speaker clone to be the only one addressing civilians. Nezu clapped tiny paws. Marvelous. And research bonus. This gives us longitudinal data on clone civilian interaction outcomes. I do love a chart. Aizawa's mouth almost twitched, which for Aizawa was a cartwheel. Last point for today. Memory. Your dispels create. What was the term you used? Receipts, Deku said sheepishly. Right, receipts. How do you guarantee you aren't drowning? Deku lifted his notebook. Filing discipline. Micro missions. No more than 4 dispels at once unless seated with a spotter. Spotter, Aizawa repeated. So a buddy system. I volunteer to build a monitoring protocol, Momo said, already outlining sensors that track pupil dilation and microtremor fatigue. We can create a safe dispel station for high-volume operations. Document it, Aizawa said. Nezu will sell the policy to the commission. Nezu raised his cup. To legal frameworks that protect the spirit without strangling the letter. Deku allowed himself a grin. I think you have that backward. Do I? Nezu's whiskers quivered. Splendid. The man in the glass house. The city's skyline was a cone rushed through steel hair. Between 2 unremarkable buildings, a glass house slept on a roof. abandoned once by a florist, reclaimed by a different species of gardener. Inside, fog drifted in sheets from plastic tubs, caressed by copper wire and patient hands of a man whose face the city would not remember if it passed him in the street. He kept his hair tied back with a strip of cloth the color of old storms. His quirk pressed moisture and dust into obedient patterns the way some people press words into lines that make nations. Screens leaned in a crooked choir around him. On one, a hospital landing caught in chaos. On another, a downtown intersection blooming with replicas. On a third, green smoke and a boy who multiplied like an answer that refused to be wrong. "They call him Midoriya," the man murmured. His voice was the part of a whisper that hides under doors. "They call me Hayes." He lifted a hand and the air over the table condensed into a small tornado of glitter. Construction dust, skin flakes, flower pollen, given choreography. He nudged it left. It followed like a dog taught with patience instead of pain. "Clones that file," Hayes said. "Good boy, you learned to keep your receipts." He sprinkled iron filings into one tub, and the fog took a new character, Ferris, eager to crowd. He flicked a switch. Coils hummed. The fog pressed against the coil in a soft collapsing embrace. "Let's see how many copies can keep time when the metronome lies." He tapped a key and the hospital footage rewound. The orchestra lanes glowed where Midoriya's ropes had sung. Hayes drew a transparent overlay with a stylus, small c. RCLES that marked clone bait sites. Places where a clone would naturally go to do something noble and small. He attached rules to the circles. Burst when vacated, pulse 30 seconds after dispel. Emit a sound 1 octave below city noise. The algorithm smiled without teeth. On another screen, a police report scrolled. The reflection emitter case. Hayes enlarged a corner, watched a clone pop into Deku proper. Watched the original inherit a step and spend it. He wrote into the margin. Delay the world so the merge arrives late. He underlined it twice. He shut the coil off and the Ferris fog relaxed. He turned to a rack of canisters labeled with a tidy hand. Soot, sea salt, glass, copper, flour. He palmed one, glass, and shook it gently. Light fractured inside it into a brief false aurora. "People think Hayes hides," he told the glasshouse, which listened like all good rooms. "Real Hayes reveals. It makes beams visible. It shows how the air moves. And where the air refuses to." He set a thin stack of letters into a wire basket. Each envelope was addressed to a small time broker who thought they were a big time broker. Each offering a taste of a new device that would be very illegal and very interesting. Delay nets. Vacuum bells, resonant steps. He ran a finger along the top one, almost tender. "We'll invite the boy to dance where the floor remembers every shoe that walked it." His phone blinked. A message from a supplier. "The Nomu raid failed. Commission is sniffing." Hayes sighed as if his tea had grown cold. "Good," he typed back with 2 thumbs. "Nothing teaches faster than triumph. Send them footage we want him to see. Omit the parts we don't." He stood in the center of the glasshouse and raised both hands. Fog braided itself into a cord that wove through the room's ribcage, spelling out the simplest of words if someone cared to read it in the right light. "How many receipts can you carry?" Hayes smiled because he knew boys who collect answers can be made to pick up questions until their arms shake. The quiet between plans. Back on campus, Deku jogged the track with a single clone pacing him half a lane ahead. Just enough separation to think out loud without making teammates stare. "We didn't talk about death," the clone said quietly, matching his stride. "What happens if one of us doesn't make it back because the original doesn't make it back?" Deku's lungs traded the thought for oxygen and back again. "Then we finish the job in the shape of whoever's left." The clone nodded, satisfied. He lifted a hand, same spiral, same pulse, and dispelled voluntarily. The memory arriving like a clean card rather than a flood. "We finish the job in the shape of whoever's left." Deku repeated it to the empty lane. "We finish the job." He slowed, put hands on knees, and breathed until the world leveled. The spiral was cool in his palm again. He sensed, not heard, not saw, Yoichi's porch-light smile somewhere just out of sight. He sensed All Might's question lodge. "Do you like a pebble where the mind meets the heart? Do you like being many? Guard the part of you that likes it." "I will," he promised. "I will." In the sky above, clouds began to gather in ways that maw. The barometers nervous and villains form plans. Somewhere between 2 indifferent buildings, A man in a glasshouse tuned fog like a piano. And the city waited, which is what cities do best between the moment a doctrine is written and the moment it's tested. Rush Hour woke up wrong. It wasn't rain, it was haze. A milk glass fog that turned the city's edges soft and the colors too clean, as if someone had lowered the sun and raised the saturation. Crosswalks rippled like heat mirages. Traffic lights wore halos that bled one into the next until red thought it was yellow and yellow envied green. Somewhere a low hum pressed behind teeth, the note you feel more than hear. People stepped a half beat off and then the half beat became a stumble. From a roof where tomato vines once learned patience, a man watched and tuned the morning. He lifted his hand and the fog near an intersection condensed obediently, seeded with glass dust and a scatter of iron filings. The coil beneath his table purred. False morning, Hayes murmured. Let's see if you can tell the difference. He tapped a key. In the fog below, tiny bell-shaped devices, vacuum cups dressed as street detritus, armed with a syncopated blink. The UA group sprinted out of the transport van already in assignment mode. Aizawa's hair floated with the beginning of erasure, but he held it, conserving edges. Ida's engines trembled in his calves. Momo had a duffel bag that would become anything she could pronounce. Deku pressed his palm against the van door as it slid shut, the spiral mark cool. He could feel the city's RHY, THM and the wrongness clapping between the beats. Anchor in tension, he said, voice steady, doctrine opening their umbrella against panic. Keep the arteries open, everyone moves. No pileups, no echo panic. One voice to civilians. Me. Momo, anti-resonance anklets for the team and 10 spares. Iida, you're a clean lane, run a visible corridor and own it. Tsuyu, take height. Watch vertical flow for false currents. Uraraka, feather gravity on any top-heavy loads we call out. Todoroki, you are wind. Push Hayes sideways, not at faces. Bakugo cracked his neck like a door. I hit the dumbest piece first. Hit devices, not civilians, Aizawa said mildly. They poured into the false morning. The sound changed as they crossed the curb. Deku felt it on his tongue. A low, almost kind thr. Obe that wanted to coax steps into sync with a rhythm no human body likes. Momo slapped a bracelet onto his wrist mid-run. The hum in his jaw softened. Anti-resonance, she said. Broadband. It kills battery in 20 minutes. Deku's danger sense lit like a constellation, then went busy. Not wrong. Rich. Too many small threats moving like a flock. Illusions alone didn't set it off. The hum did nothing to it. But the vacuum bells pulsed to a real mechanical schedule and the glass dust turned lamps into coin tricks that hid real dents and drops. If he treated all of it like an attack, he'd freeze. Anchor, he reminded himself. Keep the arteries open. He clapped his hands. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 3 clones puffed into being around him, and 2 more further down the street outside the densest fog. The spiral on his palm warmed, steady, not warning. They fanned by doctrine. Conductor, string, scout, brass, burst. Black whips snapped into lanes. Hands lifted. Voices stayed one. Everyone, eyes on me. Step to the tape and follow the beat marks. Deku chalked the pavement. Step, pause. Turning the corridor into a song like last time, and watched panic yield to a rhythm that remembered itself. Bakugo's first explosion punched a clean hole in the fog over a sidewalk. Instead of dissipating, the haze flowed around the gap and refilled it as if it knew how to wear a blown-out shoulder. It's smart, Bakugo spat. Grimly pleased. Bring me smarter. Hayes obliged. A commuter bus groaned as the street tilted. Not the street. The air. The fog clenched near the front bumper. Low. Frequency pressure tugging rubber just enough to make the bus think downhill thoughts. From the other side of the block came a cough of smoke. A daycare's ventilation round tripped Hayes back indoors until someone propped the door. And now half a dozen tiny voices cried because they had been told long ago to cry if the world tasted wrong. Clone bait. 2 noble emergencies, neatly simultaneous. Deku's stomach did the old grab. The spiral on his palm gave a single, tiny tightness, a knot forming at a bad thought. He heard All Might's T-voice in his head. Guard the part of you that likes being many. He heard Nana. No pain without purpose. He heard his own draft rule. 1 voice to civilians. He didn't spawn 10 of himself. Bakugo, bus, he called, and the blonde comet was already moving. Uraraka with him. Feather the front axle. Momo, masks for daycare. filter salt, fine glass, and oil carry. Iida, Tsuyu, with me, we keep the corridor open. The spiral cooled, anchor held, a scout clone skated the curb, danger sense mapping the vacuum bells, half hidden in discarded coffee lids, stuck under bench slats, magnetized to hydrants. They pulsed not when stepped on, but when the air arrow. Them rippled with the signature of a clone dispel, a pressure kiss that popped a bell and flooded a pocket of fog with a sharp suck. Oh, that was the trick. Punish filing, punish receipts, delayed receipts, Deku said into the bone mic. Now, the conductor clone set a marker. A rescue blanket clipped into a doorway, the metal grommets a tiny target. Momo tossed him a compact sensor pack. He slapped it on the blanket pole. Safe dispel station online, her voice chimed. It will pull a receipt when you touch it. Deku's clones changed posture you could only see if you were watching you. Our own bones. When they finished a micro mission, they didn't pop. They tagged out by brushing that blanket once and let the original take their memory on purpose, delayed, throttled, like checking out a book, not having a shelf fall on you. The first time he tapped the grommet and pulled a receipt, it slid into him like cold water down a hot throat. The vacuum bell 10 meters away did not pop. Hayes's trap blinked dumb, disappointed. On the roof, Hayes watched the data line go flat. He smiled. Learned faster than I budgeted for. Good. He adjusted the coil, the hum lowered, brushing ankle bones. He sent a wave through the iron-laced fog beneath a footbridge. The pedestrians there began to unconsciously match steps, little gaits veering towards a single rhythm that was not theirs. Iida shot onto the footbridge like a bright line in a smear painting. He clapped his hands, cadence loud, voice clear. 1 2 3, step left, 1 2 3, step right. His engines didn't blast. They throbbed on his count. People fell out of Hayes's rhythm into Iida's without realizing they had been trapped by a song. He ran the rest of the bridge at parade pace, anti-resonance anklets eating battery like candy, and turned an echo chamber into a metronome. Nice lane, Deku said, genuine delight cutting through the hum. Thank you, Iida called, sincerity like a flag. At the bus, Bakugo hit the pavement twice in short, angry hops and then stayed low, palms out. Don't jump, he shouted through the open doors. I'm not your trampoline. Uraraka touched the front bumper, whispered lighter normal in a breath cadence. Easing the seesaw until the wheels remembered grip. Todoroki sent wind across, not at, the windshield, pushing the haze sideways like a curtain without smacking the bus in the face. Resonant steps on the daycare floor, Tsuyu croaked in Deku's ear from the roofline. Vent pulse every 8 seconds. I can jam the vent if Momo gives me sticky foam with low outgassing. Already making, Momo said, and a tube appeared in Tsuyu's hand like a magician accepted better assistance. Deku loaned. He threw Black Whip not as lines but as threads that touched street furniture, signposts, bike racks. Light poles, without wrapping them, just kissing with contact points that could slide. String clones mirrored him down the block, 3 meters apart, keeping everything under a gentle tension that refused to let a vacuum cup's tiny hunger eat one pocket of air all at once. Black Whip Loom turned a street into a moving net with just enough give to ride out pulses and just enough pull to flatten them. A vacuum bell thumped. The loom drank it with a shiver. A second thumped. The loom passed the hiccup along to 3 anchors like a slack taut and then released. Hayes cocked his head. Elegant, he admitted to the tomato vines. Let's poke the weft. He moved the fog as a block over a manhole cover, condensed it, then set 3 bells to pop in accord, slightly out of phase. The result was not a loud thing. It was a lean. The crowd slid half a step toward the curb like a tablecloth being tugged, the edge of panic sharp as a paper cut. Deku floated an inch, just an eye, NCH, and the loom re-centered on his waist, the center of the web floating for a heartbeat so the net could re-hang itself on a new level. The lean became a bounce. People laughed without knowing why. Laughter breaks bad spells. A child pointed. The hero is a kite. The daycare door breathed out as Tsuyu jammed the vent and Momo's foam sent the haze back outdoors with a rude thwap. Recovery Girl, interns, masking up, poured into the corridor the clones had kept open and whisked toddlers past brass clones doing what brass instruments do best. Be obvious and make bold noises. This way, no running, follow the blue tape, over the comm. Aizawa marked a new threat with that special indifference only teachers possess when labeling a pop quiz. 3 unknowns on the north face putting devices. Movement's wrong. Not civilians. On it, Bakugo said. Save me some toys. Deku sent a burst clone to intercept. Fa Jin in ankles, not showy, just plenty. The clone slid into view like a striking thought, tapped a device with Black Whip, and realized it had no mass. Hologram. Decoys, the clone reported, landing by reflex on the one rooftop tile that wasn't dusty. He felt it. That's real. He lifted it, found a vacuum bell mounted beneath, not armed. A camera built into its skirt blinked. He saw himself. He saw his own eyes widen, then didn't dispel. He tagged the safe station instead and waited to be pulled. Delayed. Deku whispered, forcing his breathing even, and when he finally touched the grommet the memory arrived without any pop. Hayes's camera watched a boy refuse the timing. On the roof, Hayes's mouth quirked. I promised myself I wouldn't get fond, he told the glass house, which ignored him like rooms do when you lie. He slid into the next phase. The hum dropped lower, just for a bar, and every reflective surface on the block, windows, phone screens, the slick stripe on a bike lane, caught it. For less than a breath, every reflection ran late. Not by much, a tenth of a second, barely a blink. But if you were a hero who caught movement with the corner of your eye and filled the difference with Fa Jin, you'd smash where someone was, not where they would be. Deku's S. Holder twitched and danger sense screamed. That particular tone it reserves for your own good habits being used against you. He didn't move. He let the wrongness pass his eyes like a fish trailing a lure. He relaxed his knees. Don't spend motion on debt, he told himself. New rule minted in a heartbeat. He took a step only when the reflection caught up to the person, and then he moved, just 2 clicks of speed. Plenty to pluck a teenager from between a cab and a cyclist who had thought the lane was empty. New doctrine entry, he said under his breath. Hayes can delay reflection. Clones. No Fa Jin reflex on reflective cues. Danger sense priority. The spiral on his palm stayed cool, like approval written in a language he was learning to read. Bus stable, Uraraka reported, voice with. That post-scare tremble the body does when it can afford to notice it was scared. Passengers clear. Daycare empty, Suyu said. Nurses complain about foam, ribbit. She sounded pleased anyway. North Face devices are trash. Bakugo growled in his version of we didn't blow up any children, so this is a good morning. The fog thinned, but not by physics. It felt like someone had lifted a hand from a dimmer. The hum eased. The city returned to its own breath. Deku dismissed brass and string one at a time, pulling receipts at the safe station. Head high so civilians would see the same person. One voice, steady. Headaches threatened at the edges like a storm that obeys property lines, visible but not in his yard. Aizawa pointed with his chin to a glittering thread stretching skyward, almost invisible. You see that? Suyu did, because frogs know air. Ribbit. It's a trail. He left dust-hungry for a coil. Updraft path. Glasshouse. Momo guessed. They took the stairs 3 flights at a time. The greenhouse door was unlatched. Tomato vines tried to remember summer. On the table, the coil stilled. On a chair back, a strip of storm-colored cloth held a paper clipped to it. Deku approached, aware of everyone not breathing like the room was a church they hadn't decided the denomination of. The paper was a map of the Midtown grid with 3 circles drawn in tidy hand. Beside them, notes. Substation 14. Teach me how to see in the dark. Relay Tunnel C. How much of you is you without an echo? Old Market Atrium. What happens when the choir sings the wrong song? Bakugo read over his shoulder. I hate him, he announced. Momo's mouth went thin. He's engineering experiments on us. Aizawa looked at the coil, then at Deku. He's also Lee. RNING from you as fast as you're learning from him. We move the lessons faster. Deku flipped the paper. On the back, 1 sentence. How many receipts can you carry? He turned his hand over. The spiral on his palm brightened once. Faint as breath on a window. It didn't tighten. It noticed. We don't answer his question, Deku said softly. We ask our own. How many can we carry together? All Might would have liked that line. Deku put it in his notebook anyway so he could show him later and be mortified when his mentor got proud in public. They left the glass house as they found it, except F. Or the coil Momo quietly disassembled with insulated tongs and a bag marked evidence. Down on the street, the false morning broke into real day. The city flushed and refilled its veins and, because it was a city, got back to the business of living. Deku sat on a bench under a tree whose leaves pretended to be 100 different greens. He touched the grommet one last time. 2 small receipts he saved for after the dust settled slid into place. The exact weight of a toddler tucked against his chest. The exact cadence Iida had used to rescue a bridge with a song. He filed them where they belonged. New doctrine notes, penciled in on the walk back. Delayed receipts. Clones finish micro-missions, tag the safe dispel station, and wait. The original pulls memory in controlled doses. Result: enemies can't booby-trap the filing. Black Whip Loom. Convert lanes into a dynamic net with sliding anchor kisses. Resist pressure pops by distributing load across 3 anchors minimum. Center float trick re-centers the net when crowds lean. Reflection delay counter. When reflections lag, danger sense greater than FA Jin reflex. Don't spend motion on visual debt. Resononc. E-hygiene. Anti-resonance anklets good for approximately 20 minutes. Replace in rotations. Never run a corridor without a visible metronome, Iida, drums, claps, whistle. Clone ethics reminder. No pain without purpose. One voice to civilians. No more than 4 receipts at once, even in victory. The spiral cooled as the graphite dried. The mark liked good notes. The lights went out in a way cities don't forgive. No flicker, no cough. Just, off. Midtown paused like a held breath and, because momentum hates pauses, bumped into itself. Elevators froze between floors. A tram hissed into silence. Traffic lights went blind. A hospital corridor lost its gentle amber nightline and became a spine of shadow. Then the second wave hit. People. Voices rose, phones lit, and the thin emergency systems that should have bridged the gap didn't. Substation 14 hadn't tripped. It had been folded. The grid map on the commission's wall showed a dark bloom where power should have been stubborn. On a rooftop where glass remembered tomatoes, a man turned a dial until magnetized dust curled toward anything made of moving metal, latches, rails, chain link, bike frames, and made each want to kiss the nearest cousin. Let's conduct, Hayes said to the quiet, and see what song you choose in the dark. The UA van's cabin became a war room on wheels. Aizawa checked his phone. No ping from emergency lighting beacons. Momo, already gloved, snapped open a hard case labeled spark kits. Flat capacitors, thumb-sized rectifiers, insulated throw lines, and a fistful of non-conductive anchor nails. Deku press. Ed his spiral-marked palm to the case lid, centering the doctrine in his chest like a weight belt. Anchor in tension, he said, and everyone listened because the city needed a sentence. Relight the arteries. Keep the choir together. One voice to civilians. Me. Momo, spark kit loadouts and anti-mag chalk. Iida, you're our metronome in dark corridors. Todoroki, draft cold air curtains to drop haze sideways. Uraraka, Suyu, vertical rescue and stuck elevators. Bakugo, device hunting, pop bells without echo. Aizawa, erase any support quirks on scene. Aizawa nodded once, hair lifting. Write clean receipts. Deku slid the van door open into a real night. He clapped his hands. Kage Bunshin no jutsu. Smoke, footfalls, breath. The street filled with 30 Midoriyas in green and black. The spiral on his palm warmed. Not tightening. Noticing. They fanned to pre-planned posts like an orchestra taking chairs. Orchestra variant. Relay, the original called. Conductor nodes at intersections 3, 5, 7. Strings become throw lines. Brass, be obvious. Scouts, map magnet drift and vacuum bells. Bursts, carry spark kits and run handoffs. Delayed receipts only. File at safe stations. M. Omo slapped a Mylar rescue blanket to a street lamp with tape and rivets. A palm-sized sensor clicked on. First safe dispel station live. Clone hands met blanket grommet to tag in. Nobody popped. The doctrine said when to leave. Not Hayes' traps. They moved. The first artery. Intersection 3 lay black and hesitant, cars stacked like punctuation. Deku floated through stalled lanes, Black Whip out in polite taps on hoods. Stay. A burst clone, spark kit slung like a messenger bag, reached the control box and found the panel screws magnet stubborn, dust making them want the driver even more. Anti-mag chalk, Momo said, appearing with a carpenter's fist of dull white sticks. Line their path. The clone traced a rectangle's worth of chalk where screws would roll if they fell, then press. Add a non-mag nail between glove and screw, giving the dust a cheaper date. The screw came free. Inside, the manual override keyhole waited like a dare. Power budget. 90 seconds of green, then 60 dark while the capacitor refills. The clone reported, "We can't do all 4 directions. One at a time," Deku said. Green wave east to west. Iida. Engines thrummed. Iida took the far end of the block at a parade cadence. 1-2, 1-2, keep my rhythm, 1-2. His voice became a rope. People grabbed it without thinking and stepped where he said. And because that's how crowds work, the second line copied the first. Green in 3, 2, 1, the clone said, and threw the switch. The lane lit like a string of wakeful eyes. Cars shuddered forward, then calmed because a voice in the dark had become a road. Next node, ready, called the conductor at intersection 5. Fa Jin baton in 3, Deku answered. The nearest burst clone crouched, stored motion to the knee joints. Sprinted exactly 5 steps to the safe station, and brushed the grommet. The original pulled the micro rush, spent it, 2 clean strides, to reach the next box on time. He didn't hoard the feeling, he passed it. A second burst clone used that gifted timing to hit the next switch exactly as the wave arrived. Receipt weave was not one person getting fast. It was 30 of the same person agreeing about when to be fast. Hayes watched 3 intersections flip in a rolling green. He pressed 2 fingers to the coil. Cute. He dropped a silent haze sheet into a hospital loading bay and lured the magnet dust onto a metal fire door. Kissing latch to frame with a soft, adhesive hunger. Elevators and air. Uraraka and Tsuyu reached a residential tower lit only by phone flashlights and fray. Kids cried. Someone yelled for a landlord nobody liked. An elevator car stuttered between floors with 3 heads peering under its top frame. Ribbit, Tsuyu said softly, anchoring a throw line with a non. Mag nail into the drywall. A sin and a mercy. Ocha, lighter in 3? I'll keep the air sweet. Uraraka touched the elevator rather than the people. The car sighed upward a whisper. Light, lighter, normal, hold. Her breath became a lever. Tsuyu's tongue anchored a second line because sometimes you use the tools you have. The heads ducked, hands came up, weight shifted. This way, don't look down. The elevator settled an inch. Great job, you're doing great. Their rhythm made the dark small enough for one person to cross. On the landing, a brass clone waved glow tape. Follow my voice, one at a time, down the left stair. Brass existed to be impossible to ignore. Down in the loading bay, a nurse shoved a fire door with her shoulder and cursed as the latch kissed harder. Todoroki arrived in a scatter of frost, palms up. He didn't blow haze at faces. He made a curtain, cold air pulling the dust down like the first snow that convinces late mosquitoes to retire. He slid a wooden wedge, Momo's gift, into the gap. Wood ignored Magnet's sweet talk. The door admitted them with the world's quietest apology. Magnet drift. Magnetized dust is drifting to moving metal, a scout clone said, crouched in a bike rack turned hedgehog. If it piles on a bus door we'll lose egress. Stop the moving, Deku said. He tapped Black Whip to stall a door in the open position. Gentle anchor, not choke. Momo, non-mag sleeves for door rails. She was already sewing adhesive fabric onto a sliding track, treating a city like a costume. This will ruin some maintenance schedules, she muttered, and save some lives. The commission can bill me, Deku said, which made Aizawa snort on the comm in a way that meant good instinct, bad accounting. The second artery. They pushed the green wave north. Each intersection woke in turn. 90 seconds of permission, 60 of patience. Drivers saw a pattern emerge, and once a city sees a pattern, it helps. Hayes lowered the ambient hum to a note that made window glass sympathetic. Reflections lagged again. Clones approaching switchboxes saw their own hands late and, if they were the panicky part of Deku, might have grabbed wrong. The doctrine held. Danger sense over reflection. Deku whispered, and the clones obeyed the feeling instead of the picture. Hands didn't grab late. They waited for the catch-up and then turned. A burst clone tripped. A vacuum bell hidden under a welcome mat and felt the air lean. He considered popping to hand the experience over, and didn't. He tagged the blanket, delayed the receipt, and kept moving. Across town, a different clone used a baton of Fa Jin to make a deadline. The bell's suck died into the loom before it could slurp anyone into a stumble. By the time they reached the plaza feeding the hospital, the relay had a rhythm. Conductor, spark, green, metronome, chalk, pull, repeat. In the hospital stairwell, Ida's voice bounced off concrete and made a little empire. Step, hold, he clapped, slow and proud. People stopped trying to beat the dark and began marching through it. The difference is everything. Recovery girls' interns took the corridor brass had cleared, grumbling cheerfully about foam on their shoes. And ferried infants in clear cribs like little boats. The spiral on Deku's palm glowed cool. The choir was together. Substation 14. Found the fold, Momo said over comms. Already in the substation with Aizawa. Panels fine. No heat. It's like the switchgear. Forgot which was on. Quirk? Aizawa asked. Device, Momo said, pointing with her flashlight at a palm-sized puck clamped to a busbar. A coil faintly glittering with glass dust. Electromagnet with a low cycle, sleep, pulse. It told the switch to nap. Erase won't touch it, Aizawa said. Hard remove. Non-mag clamps, Momo said, and produced a polymer wrench and a stubborn jaw. The puck came off like a bad sticker. The grid diagram on her tablet exhaled into orange. Emergency lighting pinged alive across 6 blocks. Daisy chaining green waves they hadn't even touched yet. Hayes watched his substation toy die and tilted his head. The girl's gift isn't making. It's deciding. Dangerous. He turned a knob. Relay Tunnel C. Under the city, the service tunnel known as Relay C hummed with the world's background music. Ducts, cables, old conversations soaked into concrete. Hayes poured a sheet O.F. Smart haze into it and wound the echo up until every sound met itself and fell behind a half step. Footfalls stuttered. Voices doubled. It didn't make you deaf. It made you doubt the origin of your own noise. He set down echo strips. Thin membranes stretched across air like cobwebs, tuned to peel a voice and send it back a second later at a barely wrong pitch. He seated vacuum bells in the gutters. Set not to pop on pressure but on silence, a perverse little trap that went off when a hero held still to listen. He waited. On the surface, the relay had turned most arteries into veins, blood moving. Panic clotting reduced to a nuisance. Deku could feel the city's heart rate coming down. The spiral on his palm cooled further, as if the mark liked a pulse settling. Last circle on the map, Aizawa said, dry as chalk. Relay C. He left you a dare. Deku looked at the team, their batteries low, their eyes bright. I'll scout first with 2 clones. Back up on my mark. They dropped into the tunnel. The hum wrapped them. The first step copied itself back to their ears at a relationship that tasted like lying. The second step copied harder. Danger sense refracted, not silenced, threats blurred by their own reflections. Deku halted, and 3 vacuum bells in the gutter popped for the sin of stillness. Air leaned, a cheap magician's ripcord tugging everyone an inch. Keep moving, Deku said, switching to shadow steps, never letting the air take a picture long enough to frame. He sent 1 clone left to the old cable alcove, 1 right to the maintenance ladder. The original took center, eyes on the seam where wall met floor, because seams tell the truth. Anchor intention, he said, louder than the hum. It mattered more here. Keep the choir together. The echo strips caught his voice and sprayed it back half a second late. Gather, gather, gather. 30 other voices answered because 30 Dekus existed, and for a heartbeat the tunnel filled with himself. He felt the spiral on his palm warm. Not a warning exactly, an edge. The scribe's lesson braided through the hum. The spiral measures distance between songs. 1 voice, he said, and took a breath through his nose and slowed. 1 voice to the team. I'm the only one who says the sentence. His clones shut up. The tunnel's chorus shrank from cacophony to a single baritone saying what needed saying. The echo S. Trips obeyed physics. They sent back only what they got. Left alcove clear. The left clone reported, catching himself. Tagging safe station. Right ladder jammed. Mag dust on the latch, the right clone said, softer. Then quieter still as he caught the rule. Wedge applied. Good. Deku stepped, knees awake, weight forward. Black whip kissing the wall at intervals to steal a rhythm from stone instead of sound. He pushed 1 vacuum bell with a toe and let it pop harmlessly so the next one wouldn't have rhythmic company to recruit. Ahead, Hayes's favorite toy waited. A coil in a box, this on. E-tuned not for sleep or hum but for steel. It would drink charge off their spark kits, off their comms, off their bones if given a friendly skin path. Beside it, a letter on a clip. If you know where you are, say so. Deku didn't oblige. He raised a hand. Behind him, the team arranged themselves by habit. Iida at corridor edge, knees soft. Momo already digging for a non-conductive hook. Uraraka. With one palm on the wall and one hovering near the original's elbow. Suyu on the pipe like it was a pond's edge. Todoroki feeling the air for what needed convincing. Bakugo scowling because the M wanted him to talk and he respected the rule for once. Deku took one more step. The tunnel repeated it 30 times. He smiled, small and stubborn. We keep moving, he said, in the single voice that belonged to the sentence. We take the box. We don't answer his questions. We keep the choir together. The spiral warmed again, closer to glow now, not heat. Noticing, he could almost feel the scribe on a balcony he couldn't see. Head tilted, watching a student keep a promise. He reached for the coil, and Hayes, somewhere above, smiled because the next trick wasn't about electricity at all. The tunnel's echo strips shifted pitch together, just a hair, and 30 of Deku's own breaths arrived late enough to sound like strangers. The chapter ended on that borrowed breath, the coil a blah. CK mouth in a room that wanted to sing the wrong song. Doctrine notes, scribbled by phone light, tagged at the safe station. Receipt weave. Baton FA gin and timing, not raw speed. Wave intersections in order. It's a choir, not a solo. Spark kit protocol. 90s green, 60s dark. Chalk screw catchers. Non-mag nails greater than dust magnet. One switch, one direction. Announce. Resonance hygiene version 2. In total dark. A metronome is a rope. Ida's cadence greater than ambient hum. Replace anklets every 20 minutes. Mag drift counter. Wooden wedges for latches, sleeves for rails. Stall doors in open position with black whip kisses. Not raps. Echo ethics. One voice in tunnels. Clones do the work. The original speaks the sentence. Vacuum bell counter. Don't feed them silence. Shadow steps only. Pop single bells on purpose to prevent chorus. New caution. Reflection lag extended to sound. Danger sense plus seam watching greater than ear cues. The spiral cooled when the team repeated the anchor without speaking. The tower was a question mark stabbed into the sky. Half finished, its central core could rotate for crane alignment. An engineering flex that made inspectors nod and normal people uneasy. Tonight, the core rotated when nobody told it to. Scaffolds creaked. Safety nets bowed. On the 41st floor an orange-vested night shift cleaning crew clustered beside. EA site tour of structural engineering interns who had picked the worst extra credit of their semester. Below, the city's blackout arteries pulsed dimly back to life. On a rooftop greenhouse, Hayes rolled fog between his fingers. Dance lesson 2, he told the glass. Partner work. He dropped echo strips down the tower's stairwells like translucent ribbons. Hung delay nets across open floors to time shift clone merges by half beats. Glued vacuum bells to vertical truss members where the air would rush when the core moved. And tucked steel coils into junction boxes to drink any power Momo tried to lend. He set a last switch. Rotate core, 5 degrees per minute. Slow enough to doubt yourself. Fast enough to matter. The UA van slammed to a stop at the site fence. Sirens painted cranes into myth. Anchor in tension, Deku said as they ran, the sentence landing in ribs where it could hold. Freeze the spin, ferry the people, keep the choir together. One voice to civilians. Me. Momo popped a latching case. Gadgets online. She snapped 3 things into hands without breaking stride. Sticky light marbles. Thumb-sized, non-electric chemiluminescent orbs that stick on imp. Act and paint a gentle runway on steel or concrete. Marked with reflective hash so Blackwhip can see them in low light. Earbone beaters. Bone conduction metronomes that clip behind the ear and keep an air-independent beat. Haptic plus inner ear pulse, immune to echo strips. Loom microdrones. Palm quads with soft tethers that carry Blackwhip filaments to make mobile anchors. Low M profiles so the steel coils ignore them. Set to hold a fixed shape unless given a new beat. Remember battery, Momo warned. Drones, 14 minutes. Beaters, 60 at medium tempo. Copy. Deku clipped a beater, felt 1-2. 1-2 arrive in his skull like a calm heart. He clapped. Cage Bunshin no jutsu. Puff, puff, puff until a small platoon of himself took the mud. The spiral on his palm warmed. Noticing. Not tightening. They fanned to doctrine. Orchestra. Tower variant. Conductor at core control. Strings run Blackwhip loom with micro drones. Burst fairy kits and people. Brass. Be obvious. Scout map echo strips and delay nets. Delayed receipts only. One voice to civilians. Aizawa's eyes were already red with kindness disguised as threat. No heroics that violate your rules, he said. It landed like a signature on a permission slip. The climb. Sticky light marbles arced through air. Ching-ching onto steel uprights, blooming ghost green lanes up the stairwell. The EC. Hose hit back a half-second late. Hayes's cheap magic. But the earbone beaters made their own clock. Iida took point. Boots precise, engines purring in time with the haptic tick. Left, left, hold, right, right, hold. He called it conversational volume. His voice sounded wrong in the stairwell. The beat felt right. Delay net across landing, a scout clone said, 2 steps ahead. He tossed a sticky light. The net drank the glow like a spiderweb with opinions. Skirt left. Don't brush it. Set to snare merge timing. Copy. Loom it, Deku said. 2 loom drones drifted up and held position. Tethers hung. Minga's black whip kissed the stairwell rails. A string clone fed the filaments just enough tension to let 3 bodies slide under the net without ever letting the air stand still long enough to light Hayes's bells. A vacuum bell thumped above. The loom pulsed and flattened it into a shrug. Nice, Bakugo said grudgingly, then growled at an echo like it had insulted his mother. His beater tapped his skull. Tick, tick. He stayed in time. They reached floor 41 like a thought slotted into the right sentence. The core shuddered. 5 degrees per minute felt like an earthquake trying to be polite. Sticky lights mapped the moving geometry. The intern's teacher held up both hands, the universal sign for I am trying not to cry. The cleaning crew stood in an untidy bouquet of mops. One voice, Deku murmured to himself. Then let it out. Hi, I'm Deku. We're going to get you off this floor. Quiet feet, eyes on the light line, hands on the rail. The echo strips caught him and threw 3 Deku's back. The earbone beaters overruled it with a pulse in everyone's skull. Step, hold, step, hold. People obey beats the ear believes. Uraraka, he said. Weight tricks. Keep scaffolds honest. Light, lighter. Normal. Hold, she whispered. Feathering loads so planks stopped their tired squeal. Suyu anchored 2 throw lines with non-mag nails in her tongue, because frogs in emergencies write their ow. N etiquette. And pulled a path into stillness. Core controls, Momo said, flipping open a panel and grimacing. Steel coil biting the override. Polymer wrench, non-mag jaws. And isolation clamp on the rotating joint. Deku finished with her. We stopped spin from tearing itself. She built anti-echo baffles from folded composite and pinned them to the stair cutouts. The echoes lost a foothold. ND became merely annoying instead of malicious. Delay net above the interns, a scout clone said. If I pop it, our merge arrives late. Receipt lock, Deku answered. New rule. Pull code only. He double tapped his earbone beater in a long short pattern. Clones repeated it silently with a touch of jawbone. Clones do not release anything unless I send the code. Hayes can't spoof bone. The clone grinned, his grin, and sprang. He knifed through the net, did not dispel, tagged the safe station Momo had slapped to an I-beam, and waited. Deku touched his own station on the floor below and felt the memory arrive like silk under a door. A vacuum bell popped impotently somewhere useless. Hayes watched the feed and hummed. Locks on the filing cabinet. Good boy. He slid the rotation 2 degrees faster and retuned the delay nets a hair, just enough to make eager heroes hit too soon. Core creep up, Todoroki reported, fingers splayed, cold air washing Hayes sideways so nobody swallowed it. We need a counter moment or we lose our ladder line. Then we write 1, Deku said softly to the beat. The spiral on his palm warmed a little like a hand squeezing his. Gear shift relay. Gears. He spawned 7 more clones, enough to look like a mistake to someone hoping for one. The spiral warmed but didn't tighten. Each of you loads FA Jin to a different gear, Deku said. First gear. Just a nudge. 7th. 1 big shove. You don't spend. You store and hand my timing back when I tap the pull code. They spread along the rotating ring, feet wide, knees alive. Sticky lights traced their toes on moving steel. Earbone beaters kept the grid in their bones. Hayes's delay nets thrummed, hungry for a bad merge. Strings, Deku called. Loom drones up, diamond around the core. Distribute anything we throw, no shockwaves. The drones floated, tethers humming in harmony. Blackwhip loom a glowing web that could flex like a lung. Momo's anti-echo baffles shaved the rune's lie into a film the beaters ignored. On my mark, Deku said, palms together, eyes on the joint Momo had clamped. It needed rotation to stop rotation, not brute force. Torque poured in the opposite direction where the structure wanted it. Mark 1. Quote. He tapped the pull code. First gear slid into his legs, just a tick of stored motion, and he spiraled his stance with it. The loom drank the tiny twist and spread it across 4 anchors. Mark 2. Second gear arrived. He spent it as counter roll, hips a quiet hinge. The core's wind shifted a hair. 3, 4, 5. Each pull was a clean card, not a flood. He wasn't getting faster, he was getting exact. The loom sang under his palms. The earbone beat pounded 1, 2, 1, 2, uninvolved with the rune's lies. 6. The core trembled, the spin bled. 7. Symphony. He pulled the last gear and didn't keep it. He shared it. Burst clones brushed safe stations in chain, and receipt weave ran up the tower like a fuse in reverse. Bakugo, scowling like a saint, popped 3 delay nets in a sequence Momo had drawn on his palm. 2-1-3. So the timing resynced. Deku let 7 arrive like thunder turned into rope. He called his body what? It was, One for All's careful promise, and braided his Detroit smash into an orchestra. Detroit, symphony. He didn't punch, he conducted a smash. The loom distributed force through drones and anchors, across braces and baffles. Into the isolation clamp Momo had sunk into the joint. The tower stopped the way a carousel stops when the operator knows there are children on it. No jolt, just a heavy kindness. Silence held for a single heartbeat. Then scaffold sighed into stillness, safety nets unbowed, and people remembered how to breathe like they invented it. A cheer started somewhere low, cracked by fear's leftover tremor, and grew into a sound that made Aizawa rub his eye like dust had snuck in. Fairy, Deku said, already turning. Brass, lanes and voice. Burst, pairs on the slow walkers. Uraraka, weight tricks. Suyu, you're my rail. They moved in a falling asleep way, intentions aligning. Sticky lights picked footholds. Earbone beaters kept everyone in the same secret song. Loom drones drifted as mobile guardrails, giving shape to crossing gaps. An intern stopped by Deku, eyes knocked clean. Was that a new smash? He grinned despite the ache sliding pleasantly into his bones. A smash is a solo, he said. That was a band. Down on the ground, paramedics had learned to keep space where UA students work. People stepped into blankets and cups. Todo, Roki let cold ladders fall through hot air to drop haze without flinging it. Momo shoved the last steel coil into an evidence bag like a teacher collecting a note she had definitely read. The spiral, on Deku's palm unfurled. A faint second ring circling the first like consent layered on consent. It didn't feel like leveling up. It felt like a tool saying, I understand you. He closed his hand around it like a promise. On the greenhouse roof, Hayes watched the tower's rotation graph flatten. He exhaled through his nose, amused and, annoyingly, moved. Symphony, he said to nobody. He's naming teamwork like a power. Dangerous boy. He killed the feed and left a new envelope on the glasshouse table with a map of the old market atrium. In the margin, what happens when the choir sings the wrong song? Under it, a small bag of reflective pellets labeled crowdsource. Then he walked away, the fog folding behind him like a curtain that knows its cue. Doctrine notes, chalked on the site trailer whiteboard, then copied to the notebook. Gear shift relay. Clones preload FA Jin at staggered intensities. Original pulls by code, earbone tap, and converts into counter-rotation torque. Result, precise, shock-free correction. Loom micro-drones. Mobile blackwhip anchors for moving geometry. Keep to diamond, quincunx patterns for distribution. Swap drones every 12 to 14 minutes. Sticky light runways. Non-electric. Mark moving platforms and timing lanes. Avoid delay nets. Use to test for nets safely. Earbone beaters. Beat over echo. Establish team tempo before entry. Use pull codes to unlock receipts. Receipt locks. No clone dispels without code at a safe station. Hayes's delay nets can't bait filing. Detroit Symphony. Multi-clone force braided through loom and anchors. Only in engineered environments with load math. Momo's call. Never for show. Ethic reminder. One voice to civilians. No pain without purpose. If the spiral tightens, Step back to rescue or coordination. Recovery girl pretended to scold him for inventing new moves while signing off on 3 bruises and 1 inflamed tendon. All Might, thin as a pencil in a suit 2 sizes too big. Listened without interrupting and said only, "The quiet you like." This was made of agreements. "I know," Deku said, and meant it. Hook in the dust. At dawn, they cracked the greenhouse door. The envelope waited like a shy snake. Inside, the old market atrium map, arrowed paths converging on a sunken stage. A note. "Bring your choir. I'll bring mine. Let's see whose song the city keeps." At the bottom, a smear of reflective dust formed a question mark, and then, when they breathed on it, a faint smile. Creepy, Kaminari opined from nowhere, because he always appeared at the worst line. Aizawa pocketed the envelope, briefing at 9. "Eat, stretch. Don't write until your hands stop shaking." Deku looked down at his palm. The double spiral cooled. He could feel the scribe in the vestige space. Somewhere not looking like pride. Distance between songs, the lesson had been. Keep it small, keep it one. He tapped his earbone beater twice. Long, short, short. It didn't unlock anything. It just felt like knocking on his own door and having it open. "Old Market," he said softly to the morning. "One more lesson." The old market atrium woke like a throat clearing. Morning vendors rolled shutters. Commuters cut diagonals toward the subway cut. A violinist tuned under the skylight where pigeons argued with the sun. Then the floor learned a new beat. It came from the tiles, from the glass, from the breath between people. The crowd's footfalls began to agree, not with themselves, with something else. A low rhythm took hold, persuasive as a sale sign. Step, step, pause, step. The kind of cadence that nudges you toward the slick patch, the missing grate, the too fast escalator. Up in his glass house, Hayes sprinkled a last handful of reflective pellets into a little fan rig that exhaled them down a ventilation shaft. Crowdsource, he told no one, smiling. Majority rules. He sent his choir, a dozen mercs in gray sneakers, down opposite aisles. They walked like a drumline. Their synchronized stride hit the crowdsource pellets, and the atrium obligingly amplified their rhythm. Below, a toddler clapped along, delighted, with no idea that the beat loved him less than he loved it. "Anchor intention," Deku said as they cleared the barricade, his voice steadying the morning the way a hand steadies a ladder. "Keep people moving safely, and let them lead." One voice to civilians. "Me." Momo popped a compact case. Community devices. As requested, each palm-sized puck held 3 pulse pins, cheap, clip-on earbone beaters with color tabs. Blue for walk, green for shuffle, strollers, elders. Amber for carry, carts, crates. No screens, just a beat and a choice. Pulse pins only in the safe corridor, Deku added. "We offer, we don't order." He clapped his hands. Cage Bunshin no Jutsu. A scatter of smoke and Deku multiplied into rolls. Brass clones jogged the perimeter with fluorescent vests and megaphones that nobody would need once the beats took over. Strings launched loom microdrones to the skylight trusses, filaments sagging in gentle catenaries that could become chorus loom. A net that anchored not just to posts but to people via soft heft. Clipped to cart handles and backpack straps. Scouts slipped into aisles, eyes on the telltales. Pellet glitter, echo strips twanging like invisible clotheslines, small vacuum bells glued to the backs of bench legs. Deku stepped onto the sunken central stage and lifted one hand. "Hey, folks, I'm Deku," he said, and the atrium's cheap acoustics promptly made 3 Dekus out of him. He kept going anyway. One voice. "Because the rule worked if you honored it. We're opening safe lanes. If you want a steady beat to walk to, my friends will clip a pulse pin behind your ear. 3 tempos, blue, green, amber. You pick. If you don't want one, follow the sticky lights in my hands." Sticky light marbles skittered and bloomed along the tile seams, outlining 2 broad S-curves through the stalls. The color warmed the air without demanding it. Bakugo took one look at Hayes' mercs and scowled like he'd bitten citrus. "They're stomping people into a ditch." "Devices only," Aizawa warned. "Hair lifting. If they lay hands, you have permission. Come try me." One merc muttered to no one, then kept time with his team. Ida's earbone beater ticked under his skin. He jogged to the north entra, NCE, and set the blue tempo with a clap that didn't need to be loud because it was true. 1, 2, 1, 2. Blue lane. Keep strollers left. Uraraka ghosted along the outer curve, palm taps lightening awnings as vendors lifted. Gravity cooperated when treated politely. Suyu perched on a stall edge, eyes high, calling soft warnings down the radio. Wet tile by the tea cellar, ribbit, small dog panic. King near the flower buckets, notes that receipt choir clones tagged and held. Deku brushed the safe station grommet on the stage rail for a measured sip of those micro-memories, then changed nothing about his face as the picture sharpened. Hayes changed the key. The echo strips hanging under the skylight shifted their delay by a hair, and the Merc's drumline got louder in the atrium's bones. The crowdsource pellets loved a strong opinion. The tiles began to pulse to gray sneakers. Deku felt the spiral warm against his palm exactly once, the kind of temperature that means you are about to get bossy. He saw the trap. Impose his beat hard enough and he'd win the room, and lose the point. The doctrine in his notebook wasn't a dogma. It was a promise to himself. One voice to civilians, not one voice instead of civilians. He took his hand off the temptation. 3 tempos, he called, picking up a handful of pulse pins. He didn't clip them to strangers. He held them out. Blue for walk, green for shuffle, amber for carry. You lead. I'll follow. A woman with a baby on her hip grabbed green and nodded gratitude. A delivery guy weighed crates in his arms, then chose amber with the rueful dignity of someone who lifts things for a living. A priest, a florist, a kid with a skateboard. You could see them decide and watch their spines change shape a little, like an instrument tuned. The Mercs doubled down, stomping their hazard rhythm harder, faces bland. The crowdsource pellets thrilled. The atrium took a half step toward the wrong song. Strings, Deku said softly into the jawbone mic. Chorus loom live. Clip to carts and backpacks. Don't pull, shape, brass, show hands, not mouths. Loom drones descended like cautious fireflies. Black whip filaments touched the soft, Velcro back. D-Tab's Momo had stuck to handles and straps. The net didn't yank, it suggested. A little guidance around a slick patch, a gentle insistence against a surge. People felt the support the way a good handrail feels. There when you need it. Invisible when you don't. Pulse pin station. A brass clone announced in a voice cheerful as daylight, standing on a cooler. Clip and pick your color. Kids love gear more than orders. Pulse pins disappeared like candy. The atrium's rhythm started to bloom in 3 colors instead of 1. The pellets tried to amplify a majority and found none. Hayes's Mercs kept their line, perfect as machines. The crowd began to sing back in mischief. Blue here, green there, amber through the center, a braid. Hayes tuned the echo strips tighter, splitting returns by aisle, left ear late, right ear early, so people felt crooked unless they adopted the Merc's steady stomp. A few wobbled, a few drifted toward the gray shoes. Give them a vote, All Might's voice said in Deku's memory. Tea steam rising like thought balloons. You'll like the answer. Deku jumped off the stage and kneeled so he could talk to the toddler who'd been clapping to everything since time began. Hey, partner, he said, pointing to his own pulse pin. Can I borrow your beat? The kid blinked solemnly and clapped even. Kids do that. They find the middle, pat, 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 not seduced by stomps, not fussed by echoes. His mom made a face that said I do not consent to my child being used as a metronome and then softened when Deku clipped a blue pin behind her own ear and matched him. Community beat, Deku said into the calm. Take the kid tempo. Iida slowed a hair. Uraraka breathed with the claps. Suyu's tongue held a sign at shoulder height so people could see pat, 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 pat even if they couldn't hear it. The pulse pins rolled the new beat across the lanes like ink across water. The crowdsource pellets, bless them, amplified the largest rhythm in the room, and because the pins were generous and the kid was steady. The rune chose. The Mercs kept stomping, precise and isolated, suddenly audible as an argument nobody wanted to have anymore. Their rhythm hit the echo strips and came back wrong. One glanced down at his own sneakers like he'd been betrayed by shoes. Bakugo was already moving. He tracked the pellets to the vent fans with a nose that had learned to love explosives and therefore respected dust. Gray Boy Choir's toys, he growled, and popped the housings in a sequence Momo had sharpied on his glove, 213. So he didn't dump a glitter blizzard on a stroller. Hayes's chorus lost its PA system. Momo slid between stalls with anti-resonance chalk and a dust scraper duct taped to a broom, dragging the thin film off the worst tiles into a bag labeled evidence in tidy block print. Do not inhale, she told a popcorn vendor, handing him a green pulse pin with the same motion. He clipped, he smiled, He fell into the child's clap. Todoroki made cold curtains where fog tried to coalesce, dropping haze straight down the gaps away from faces. Aizawa drifted by the mercs without ceremony and erased one whose quirk hummed under his hoodie. His stomp faltered. His eyes went human. "Receipt pull," murmured a scout clone, palm on the safe station taped to a pillar. Deku touched his grommet on the stage rail and drank the useful parts. Slick tile cleaned. Vacuum bell under the bench already popped and safe. The dog now wearing a pulse pin on its collar, tail thumping to pat, 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 pat. The spiral on his palm cooled. Hayes, watching from whatever corner he had bent the air into, tipped his head. "You didn't win the room," he said softly to the glass. "You let the room win itself." He didn't like it. He liked it a little. He made one last play because dying slowly is bad theater. The echo strips crossed into an odd pattern. Left aisles urged 3-step, right aisles 4-step, and the floor tried to split the atrium into dueling dances. Anger sense flashed not red but white. Too many small, safe-ish wrongs making one big wrong. Deku didn't raise his voice. He raised his hand and pointed, not at himself, at the toddler, whose clap had become a fact. "Follow the little maestro," he said to the crowd, easy as a smile. Pat, 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 pat. Something happened that made the hair lift on Deku's arms. The chorus loom felt it first, a tug. Not from anchors but from people choosing the same thing. The filaments went a fraction lighter. The micro-drones adjusted on their own because Momo had told them to follow consensus when in doubt. LSE pins buzzed blue and green and amber in sync. The echo strips, designed to return whatever they got, returned the kid's beat, and Hayes's odd split found no purchase. His merc's stomp sounded like a lie told after dessert. A woman carrying a crate looked at Deku as she eased along the sticky lights and mouthed "thank you." He shook his head and mouthed "you back." The lanes emptied themselves. Vendors retied awnings. The violinist tried the kid's beat and smiled like he'd found a song he'd forgotten. A child held up his pulse pin for Deku to high-five. Deku high-fived it. Bakugo stalked past the gray sneaker line. One twitched like he might square up. Aizawa's scarf whispered. No one squared up. "Collect what you can," Aizawa said, voice quiet and therefore very large. "Leave the rest for forensics." On the stage, under the edge of the skirting where a magician would hide a rabbit, Momo found an envelope stuck with glass dust. She peeled it free with tongs, because she is Momo, and handed it to Deku. Inside, a map of the river causeway where the city's bridges braided together like fingers. In the margin, tidy hand. One last lesson. Who keeps the quiet when the wind has opinions? At the bottom, a thumbprint made of reflective powder. If you tilted it, it looked like a face. If you tilted it another way, it looked like a question. Deku glanced up at the skylight. The Pagio NS had come back to their argument with the sun. The spiral on his palm glowed cool as a coin. He could almost feel the scribe in the vestige balcony, approving questions that bind. He crouched by the toddler and held up his notebook. "Can I write down your beat?" The kid nodded with the sovereign dignity of small children and clapped pat, 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 pat while Deku wrote. When in doubt, follow the smallest true thing in the room. All Might would say, "Good line." Deku felt himself blush in anticipation of the praise. He hoped he'd earn it again tomorrow. They walked out together under the market clock. The chorus loom unhooking itself from shoulders and carts with soft little tisk sounds. The micro-drones settling back in their nest like birds that had learned a new sky. Behind them, the atrium went back to selling fruit and train schedules and the ordinary miracle of people not colliding when they don't want to. Hayes watched the feed for 3 seconds longer than he meant to, then turned it off. Finale on the causeway, he told the glass. "Bring your doctrine, I'll bring the wind." The fog folded itself into a traveling coat. He buttoned it and stepped into his own opinion of the air. The river turned the city into a mirror that didn't quite agree. Wind combed the bridges from different directions, cross, tail, and a petty swirl that lived under the west span like a rumor. Evening soaked steel orange. Far away a siren tested the air like a finger testing bathwater. Hayes arrived first. He walked the central causeway, 3 bridges braided like fingers, and let a mesh be. Ag of threaded reflectors drift from his hand. They caught on guy wires and lamp arms. Wind had opinions. He encouraged them. Little Aeolian harps he'd hid in signposts twanged a rhythm you felt in your ribs. Vortex shedders on the guardrails whispered step, step, pause, not quite matching the city's walk. Under the eastern truss he'd strung vacuum bells reversed to trigger on sudden stillness. If people froze, the air would tug. He looked small in the evening. He liked it that way. The van door slid open. The team climbed out into a breeze that made the skin feel unsure of itself. "Anchor," Deku said. "More breath than shout. Let the bridges breathe. Keep the quiet in motion." One voice to civilians. "Me." Momo passed gear without commentary. Earbone beaters set low. A pouch of sticky light marbles, 2 loom microdrones. And a roll of broad white wind tape. Fabric streamers with sand sleeves that could make a tuned mass from nothing. "Fewer clones," Deku added. "Meeting All Might." SI where he leaned on the guardrail like weathered neon. "We trust the city." All Might's smile was a quiet signal flare. "That's my boy." Deku's palms met. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Only 7. Smoke thinned in the wind and went where it wanted. Good omen. The spiral on his left hand warmed like a cat shifting and staying asleep. Assignments fell into place. 2 strings. Loom drones 2. Carry black whip filaments across lamp standards and cable stays, building a moving slack net that could drink gusts instead of fight them. 2 scouts. Map the wind's lies. Eddies that pretended to be shelter. Strafing gusts that kissed ankles. 1 burst. Ferry injured. Sprint comms. 1 brass. Be obvious. Hands, not mouth. 1 conductor at the central control kio. SK where the emergency lanes could be switched for ambulances. "Todorki," Deku said, already feeling the rhythm of the span in his knees. Cold curtains downwind of the worst vortices. Drop the tantrums. "Ribbit," Suyu said, sliding to the underside catwalk where her eyes could see both river and grating. "I'll call the river's mood." "Iida," Deku added. "Pace the center lane like a heartbeat. No louder than the wind." "Uraraka," he finished. "Take the scaffold maintenance walk. If any section starts to hum, lighten it, then give it back slowly." "Got it," she said, which meant all. "Be kind to gravity and it will be kind back." Bakugo rolled his shoulders. "Where's Misty?" "Here," Hayes said, voice arriving on a sidewind. He stood at the causeway's crown, coat made of fog that wasn't fog. The wind parted around him like a cat detouring a puddle. "Let's not start with names," he added, and nodded at the water. "Start with breath." The harps woke. Railings sang a wrong key. The crowd, spaced in cautious knots, shifted feet without meaning to. A cyclist stumbled off and pretended he meant to dismount. The vacuum bells under the truss held their breath like a dare. Deku took 1 step. The wind pushed his shirt against his ribs like a hand checking a heartbeat. He did not argue with it. He timed to it. 1 voice, he said, and the jawbone mic carried it. He raised a hand. Palm open, slow. Left lane. Walk. Center. Pace cars only. Right. Stand and hold the rail, not the person. Brass lifted both arms in clean shapes. This way. Pause. Breathe. The alphabet of calm bodies. Sticky lights painted their path along expansion joints, not fighting the wind but giving the wind something to speak around. Strings sent loom drones up. The black whip filaments sagged perfectly into catenaries. When the breeze gusted, the net drank it, tension moving like a ripple across a sheet hung to dry. Hayes flicked a finger. The harps went higher. The guardrail flutes dropped a step. The wind's metronome lied in 2 directions at once. People's gaits got clumsy. The reversed vacuum bells under the east span waited for the first collective flinch. "Cadence," Iida breathed. Engines tick-ticking at a humane tempo. 1-2, 1-2. Earbone beaters agreed under skin. Not loud. "True." "Wind tape," Momo said, and a scout clone unrolled the white streamers across 2 lamp arms. Sand sleeves loaded the bottom edge. They sighed in the gusts, tuned to steal energy from a specific mischief frequency. The harp's complaint dropped as if someone had reasoned with a teenager and it had worked. Underwalk hum starting. Suyu called. "Low. Ribbit." 2 bays east. "Uraraka," Deku murmured. "Light, lighter." "Normal," she breathed, touching a bracket, borrowing weight and giving it B. Ack in a rhythm that taught the metal not to sway in panic. The hum missed a step and forgot itself. Hayes tilted his head. The fog of his coat blew sideways and came back, a pet with bad recall. He raised both hands. The crosswind nodded. It hit the loom and passed through on a long curve, distributed by black whip to 4 anchors like a secret told to 4 honest people. Hayes's mouth twitched. Elegant. He changed attack. Delay nets on open span? Useless here. He tuned the gusts instead. Little shears that slapped at ankles and then arrived a half-second late for shoulders, teaching hips to lie to knees. He wasn't trying to knock people down. He wanted intentions to fragment. The spiral on Deku's palm warmed, a polite warning. He let the warmth remind him. Distance between songs. He didn't multiply to fill every pocket. He kept 7, receipt pull only, he reminded them. The safe station, a blanket clipped to the kiosk, flapped. Clones finished a job, touched brass, and waited. Deku tapped. Long, short, and drank memory in sips. The reversed vacuum bells never got their moment. There was no sudden silence to eat. Everyone kept moving. Those reflectors, Bakugo said through teeth. Twangers. Allow me, Momo said, already affixing wind tape to each, turning Haze's metronomes into dampers with a single rap. She didn't remove instruments. She retuned them. The bridge's song fell back into near silence, busy only with wind you could trust. Haze walked down the crown with his palms feeling currents. You learned to listen, he said, sounding vaguely disappointed that the test wasn't cruel. Good. He stepped onto Deku's lane as if to shake his hand. The wind knelt for him without meaning to. Up close he looked like a man who slept well and deserved it, which is how the dangerous ones always look. Tell me your truth, he said quietly, and Deku realized he meant it. Deku didn't sermonize. He lifted his still hand where the double spiral lay faint as breath. I made a promise to keep our song small. He nodded behind him at the strings, the brass, the pace heartbeat, the ordinary courage of people not falling. And to keep it shared. Haze smiled with one corner. Cities are bad choirs. Sometimes, Deku said, they need a pitch pipe. Wind leaned in to hear. Haze looked past him at the loom drones, at the extra quiet where the tuned mass streamers ate a gust's tantrum. At Uraraka's hands returning a scaffold its confidence. For a blink he looked tired. I don't break things because I like breaking, he said, voice soft enough to be mistaken for decency. I break rhythms, so places stop pretending they're safe on autopilot. Deku thought of a toddler's clap in a market. Then you've done your job. Have I? Haze asked, genuinely curious, genuinely cruel, and walked backward into the wind. He raised both hands. The evening gusts lined up in a standing wave, cresting across all 3 spans, subtle, terrible. Deck plates moved a centimeter like surprise. It would not break the bridge. It would break the plan if the plan was brittle. Deku didn't let it be. Gear shift, he called, and the 7 became gears. First loaded at the west abutment, second 2 bays in, third at the crown, all the way to 7th crouched like a bow at the far pylon. None spent. All stored. Strings raised the loom into a larger diamond. The river threw its breath. The net took it and held it and waited for the conductor. On my count, Deku said, and the earbone beaters ticked the same secret tick in 100 skulls, heroes and pedestrians alike. 1, 2, he tapped the pull code and took 1st through 6th like clean notes. He didn't keep 7th, he sent it around the diamond, into Momo's clamp, through Todoroki's cold, along Uraraka's lightened seam, into Ida's legs. And back, Detroit. Symphony, he breathed, not to crush, to damp, a braided counter that met the standing wave with equal care. The bridge settled like someone put a hand on its shoulder and said, "You're not alone in this weather." Haze watched it fail to fail. He laughed, short, delighted against his will. "That's new." Bakugo arrived in his space, sweat salted and irritable. "You're done tuning my town." Haze's eyes slid sideways to Aizawa, whose scarf had already started its quiet sentence. He raised palms. "Not surrender. De-escalate. We're at philosophy now," he said, and backed toward the railing. "Don't," Aizawa warned. Haze did not jump. He stepped into his coat, and the coat stepped off the bridge, fog folding itself into a lower path only he trusted. Aizawa's erasure snapped. The fog coat hiccuped and still caught him, less elegantly. He hit a maintenance platform like a cat who pretends it wanted to fall. "Arrest teams to the East Pier," Aizawa said into his mic without changing expression. Haze paused on the strut and looked up at Deku. Wind found his hair and tried to be sentimental. He let it. "You kept the quiet," he said simply, as if awarding a badge from a school he'd hated. "Try to keep it when no one's watching." He touched 2 fingers to his brow, salute or habit, and walked under the bridge into a thicket of structural shadow and police radios. No chase. Not today. The bridge hummed the way a living thing hums when its blood is moving and its body isn't scared of itself. Deku let the 7 become 1 again. Seats pulled deliberately at the station clipped to the kiosk. Sips, not floods. The spiral cooled. The double ring looked like it had always been there. A watermark that says student in good standing. People crossed. Ambulances used the center lane without argument. Wind changed its mind 5 times and the bridges agreed without caring. Todoroki's cold curtains fell away so the river could smell like itself again. The wind tape streamed like laundry. All Might joined Deku at the rail. They watched a ferry cut a line that closed behind it as if the water was embarrassed to have been parted. You didn't play louder, All Might said, which is how he says I'm proud of you when the air is already doing the congratulating. You played truer. Deku smiled and didn't trust his voice. The city exhaled around them. The quiet wasn't empty, it was occupied by wheels and breath and shoes and late dinners. Write it, All Might added gently. I will, Deku said. He would write Causeway Quiet as a chapter heading and never read it aloud without thinking about the wind. They walked the span together. The loon drones reeled their lines. Sticky lights wore scuffs like medals. The pulse pins, blue-green amber, blinked on wrists and collars and a dog's collar, then got pocketed, souvenirs of an evening when the city kept time with itself. Back on the pier, a detective waved from behind a cruiser. We've got a trail, she said, nodding under the bridge where fog had rubbed off on a beam like chalk. He bleeds ideas more than fingerprints. Aizawa shrugged, which meant we keep going. Deku looked down at his palm. The spiral didn't glow, it rested, consent layered and satisfied, like ink that finished drying while no one watched. We'll teach it, he said to the river, to the wind, to the promise stamped on his hand. We'll make it shareable. He could almost hear the scribe on a balcony he'd never find, setting down a pen. Night came on with a soft hand. The bridges held. The city walked home. Thanks for watching.